Parshat Miketz is a masterclass in truth. When saying nothing becomes a lie, when speaking is an act of faith, and how a life of emet can still leave room for complexity and disguise. At the beginning of the Parsha, we see Pharaoh's dreams and the sudden remembering of the Sarah Mashkim. He says, Et chatai ani mazkir hayom. I recall my sins today. And finally tells Pharaoh about Yosef, the Hebrew youth who interpreted his dreams in prison. His sin is not that he told a blatant lie. It is that for 2 full years, he withheld a critical truth. His silence kept Yosef in the dungeon. This is a powerful picture of a shekel shel ha'elem, a tie of omission. No false words were spoken, but the absence of truth shaped reality. We begin by asking, is there a moment when failing to speak the truth becomes a form of betrayal? When keeping out of it is not neutrality, but moral failure? Into that vacuum of truth, Yosef is brought before Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, I have heard it said of you that you understand a dream to interpret it. Yosef answers, Biladai, Elokim ya'aneh et shlom Paro. It is not me. God will answer Pharaoh's welfare. Yosef doesn't deny his ability. He doesn't say he can't do it, but he also refuses to pretend that the power belongs entirely to him. He is giving a full truth. Shadal notes that maybe this was also a little game, that Yosef could not yet have known whether the interpretation would be good or bad, so he frames his words from the outset as dependent on God, acknowledging that the meaning and outcome lie beyond him. Yosef embodies emet in 2 directions at once. He steps up and does his best, taking responsibility, and he speaks aloud the inner truth, the outcome, the failure, is in God's hands, not his. The future, not the failure. This is very different from the butler. The butler stayed quiet to protect himself. Yosef speaks, but he speaks in a way that makes his own limits clear. Truth in his mouth is both courage and humility. And maybe he's learned at this point how to deal with the truth, as when he would spit out everything, including his dreams, insulting his brothers, maybe he knows now how to say things and when to say things. Soon after this, Pharaoh renames Yosef, Vayikra Paro Shem Yosef Tzofnat Paneach. Tur Aroch explains that Pharaoh assigned such official names to all of his ministers, and that Yosef's new title, often understood as the revealer of what is hidden, is strikingly ironic. On the surface, it advertises Yosef as the one who uncovers secrets. Yet this Egyptian identity helps conceal Yosef's own truth, that he is Yosef ben Yaakov. Later, when his brothers come and arrive in Egypt, the revealer can survive in hiding. And of course, when we talk about names and identities, I feel I need to mention Zelda's poem about a person having many names. The name from our parents, the name from our actions, the name whispered in our soul. What is our own truth? What is our own identity? Yosef's external name, Tzofnat Paneach, is a kind of costume. His inner name, Yosef, the dreamer who believes in God's word, is the truth that eventually forces its way out in the words, Ani Yosef. That revelation only becomes necessary because of an earlier distortion of truth. When the brothers sell Yosef, they do not explicitly tell their father Yosef is dead. Instead, they dip his coat in blood, show it to Yaakov, and let him come to his own conclusions, which he does. Tarof Toraf Yosef. Yosef has surely been torn apart. They never lie outright, but they also never correct their father. Their silence lets a false reality settle over the family for decades. Again, Miketz confronts us with omission. How much pain can grow out of, we never actually said it? Later in Miketz, Yaakov turns to his sons after their first encounter with the Egyptian viceroy and cries out, Lama hareotem li, laorid od liben. Why do you harm me by telling that man that you have another brother. Are you going to take away another one of my sons? Shadal explains that Yaakov is not saying you should have lied. Rather, he's saying, why'd you go into it at all? Why couldn't you use this as omission? They were not obligated to volunteer information that put Binyamin at risk. So on the one side, the Torah has shown the danger of silence. When the brothers hide the truth about Yosef, when the butler leaves Yosef forgotten. On the other hand, Yaakov now complains that the truth was offered too freely without considering the consequences, and that in light of Yosef sharing his dreams also. The Torah does not give an easy formula. It forces us to live in this tension. Chazal sharpened that tension in a very different scene, a wedding. In Ketubot 17a, the sages asked, Ketzad merakitim lifnei hakala? How does one dance before the bride? Beit Shammai says, you praise her kala k'moshehi, the bride as she is, sticking to precise, objective truth, even if it's not flattering. For them, distance yourself from a false matter is unbending. But Beit Hillel responds and says, Kala na'a v'chasuda. All brides, we should say, are fair and gracious, even if to an outside observer she might not be conventionally beautiful. But when Beit Shammai object that this is a sheker, a falsehood, Beit Hillel answer, once the groom has chosen her, we see her through his eyes. Our role is to uphold her dignity and their joy. The Rishonim explain that Beit Hillel are not dismissing emet. They're carving out a narrow, carefully defined place where softening literal truth for darchei shalom, for peace and human honor, is itself a higher form of truth because it reflects how the relationship actually lives in the heart. So now if we go back into Miketz, this sugya gives language to what we are already seeing in the Parsha. There is a sheker that protects comfort or avoids responsibility. The butler's silence, the brother's refusal to correct Yaakov's assumption, and they're speaking the truth, without wisdom or care. Perhaps what Yaakov fears when his sons shared too much with the man in Egypt, and when Yosef shared too much of his dreams. And then there's a middle path, where words are chosen with both emet and shalom in mind. As Yosef does before Pharaoh, fully honest, but also deeply aware of his place before God. Chazal teach that Chotamol shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emet, the seal of the Holy One is truth. To bear that seal in our lives is not only to avoid lying, it is to refuse to let harmful falsehood stand unchallenged when our word could make a difference. It is to admit our limits, like Yosef, and name God as the ground of reality beyond our own control. And it is to use any softening of the literal truth, if at all, only in rare, carefully weighed cases of darchei shalom, never as a cover for fear or selfishness. Yosef's journey in Miketz moves from being the victim of others' half-truths and omissions to becoming the one who holds the power of truth over his brothers, and ultimately choosing revelation over revenge. In that moment, when he says, Ani Yosef, all the layers of disguise, omission, and evasion crack open. The challenge of Miketz is to bring that kind of emet into our own speech and our own silences. To step up when the truth is needed, to recognize that outcomes belong to God, and let our lives slowly align with that divine seal stamped at the heart of the world, emet.